Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is in the country for a 4-day state visit. This is the Egyptian leader's first state visit to Kenya. Sisi and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta are expected to hold discussions at the State House in Nairobi. They aim at bolstering cooperation between their two states. Trade between the two countries is set to top the agenda during their discussions. Bilateral trade has seen a positive development over the years. The total volume of trade between Egypt and Kenya stood at approximately $450 million in 2015. Kenya exports a number of products to Egypt, predominantly its tea. Let's get more details and analysis on this story from CGTN's Adel Mahroui, who now joins us live from Cairo. Adel, how is President el-Sisi's state visit to Kenya being presented to the public there in Egypt? What are the stated goals?
Well, it is presented as part of Egypt's recent efforts in amending its foreign policy, reaching to its African roots. Kenya is one of the vital partners for Egypt in the continent. First of all, because it is a Nile Basin country, and both are members of the Knesset, and therefore there are lots of opportunities to enrich the bilateral relations between both countries. As you said, the trade volume is about $450 million. Egypt might have the top hand, just a little of 50%, with 50 million more Egyptian exports than what Kenya exports to Egypt. Tea represents about 95% of all Kenyan imports that Egypt brings in from the country. Other basic material also are included, something like asias, like rubber, sometimes tobacco. So there is a variety of products, but tea is definitely the most dominant.
Well, economic cooperation has been presented as the key motivation for this visit. Observers will take note that President Sisi has in the recent past either visited or played host to leaders of the Nile Basin countries. Is this a coincidence?
Of course not. Egypt is definitely playing a role in that area. Egypt wants to have a strong partnership with the Kenyan people in general. They want to boost the ties, not just having a regular political cooperation in region. Of course, they will discuss various topics, both leaders politically. They have on the agenda combating terrorism, the instability in the Horn of Africa, and how both can cooperate. But at the same time, economy is the fundamental key that ties them both. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah Sisi sees that there are many opportunities to develop. There are many opportunities for investment in Kenya, and there is many ways to increase the trade volume between both countries. And this is what Egypt is trying to do through Kenya, and even if that means to work together with the Knesset region to develop all the countries and to increase the trade within this region, this is one of Egypt's main intentions in the coming period.
All right, Adel Mahroui live for us in Cairo. Many thanks, Adel. Now, let's expand further on this Nile River issue. Adel mentioned it quite just slightly, but we have here in studio Otula War. He is a science journalist and environmental expert with a keen interest on issues surrounding the River Nile. Thank you very much for joining us. So, like we mentioned earlier when we were speaking to Adel, President Sisi's visit to Kenya follows his visit to Uganda late last year, to this Sudan early last year. He also hosted South Sudan's President Salva Kiir last year as well. And when you look at the trend, the pattern of these countries, these are Nile Basin states. So, and this, of course, coming at a time when Egypt and Ethiopia continue sparring over the mega dam in Ethiopia. So, in your opinion, what is President Sisi trying to achieve in this regard?
I think President Sisi is trying to make sure that the Nile Basin countries at least understand that Egypt is seriously worried about not just Ethiopia alone, but any country trying to make use of the Nile waters. It needs a lot of consultation. But Sisi is also under pressure because his predecessors were kind of, would you rather say, militant about any country trying to use the Nile waters. And this has changed because when you look closely, most of the countries support Ethiopia in building the dam. This is because, politics aside, there's a little bit that needs to be known about the Nile. First, of course, Egypt has relied on it for thousands of years. So let somebody else use it is kind of bothering them. But Ethiopians also say they are not crazy. They know that life in Egypt depends on the Nile. And the dam they are building will not be filled overnight. They say it will be spread between 7, even up to 15 years, because there are times when we have a lot of flood and a lot of water just flows in the Mediterranean. So in fact, they say this dam will help even in future. And they also say it is the same fear when Egypt was building its Aswan dam and all those. There were stories that Sudan, Ethiopia, there will be floods because Egypt was going to slow down the rate at which water was going down the Mediterranean. But I think Egypt has had, unfortunately, leaders who have been militant about this issue. But the law which gave Egypt almost unquestioned use of this water is not valid anymore. Not that the countries want to starve Egypt, but they just want Egypt to get its fair share, which I'm sure that's what they discuss with Kenya.
So then what kind of reaction is expected from the Nile Basin countries in regards to this matter? Of course, considering the regional dynamics and, other interests.
I really think that when it comes to Nile waters, it is best solved by experts. Egypt has a lot of experts in issues of water. And politics aside, there is no one who can for really say that if you build a dam in these areas, it will stop Egypt from getting its water. All that they need is to assure Egypt that a certain quantity of flow will be going to Egypt, which is what they need to negotiate about. Otherwise, most of this is just that Egypt is scared about people coming to do the same thing Ethiopia is doing. And they are right. There need to be some kind of agreement that we need, whether it is 70% of the flow or 90% of the flow, they need to agree on that. But it's not something worth going toward the way Egyptian leaders have been saying. Sisi has been very fair. The leader who was there before Sisi was actually militant about it. And even earlier, there were talks that Egypt were thinking of bombing that dam if ever it was being constructed. But I think that would be a disaster because you can't win that war. There's enough water for everybody. If you look at the sources of the Nile, take Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria has one way or the other expanded. Those who know it from 1962, there's more water in places where the lake expanded. It has never gone back to where it was.
So at this stage then, what much can be done to address Egypt's concerns? Because in theory, this dam should be inaugurated later this year.
Egypt's concerns are being addressed, and they know it. They have been told building this dam does not mean water will stop going to Egypt. This thing will take 7, maybe 15 years to fill. Just slowly, slowly. When there's drought, they don't touch. When there's floods, they take it. Equally, Kenya, they'll have a lot of discussion probably on this issue because Egypt is also building another dam coming to Lake Turkana, the Kenya border. But again, this is issue of looking at the reality. Okay, Lake Turkana, if I was there 3 months, about three years ago, and Lake Turkana had almost half a kilometer or a kilometer expanded from its original. So it's not a question of really more of emotion. But Egypt has been doing one thing which is good, and it should continue doing it. They have been encouraging the building of dams and digging of wells in many African countries. This could probably ease the pressure of people trying to build dams on the Nile. A country like Kenya, surely we can go back to build a lot of dams which were there in colonial days, and a lot of our water goes down to Indian Ocean. So I think Egypt is keen to ease the pressure on the Nile.
All right, let's leave it there for now. Thank you very much for those insights we had here in studio. Otula Owor, a science journalist and environmental expert.